Okay, welcome to episode 6 of Abundance. This one I think I'm going to call Lighting, Lightning, and Limelights. Oh my, I'd still like that. So on the screen, I've got arc lamps up from Wikipedia. So carbon arc lighting was a huge technology that got phased out during the 1800s and a little later. Uh, so let's get into it. I'll talk about. Oops, let me refresh here. So the intensity of these lights is like off the chart. Um, and the advantage of the carbon arc lamp was that you just needed compressed carbon rods like graphite and stuff like that, things that probably look like this or a little smaller. I was trying to find old ones, like old graphite pencils from that are solid carbon, compressed carbon. And so and there, let's see, we had also, oh, let's look at these photos because this is a good one. So this shows a very simple model carbon arc lamp, and the electricity being supplied is from solid state uh, liquid batteries, which are Leyden jars. And I'll talk about that later because close it. The electricity is a whole nother long topic. Kleiston jars or Leyden jars. And these were high voltage capacitors, liquid, solid state, all natural components, right? We don't need. And okay, let's look at some more of these. Just parabolic reflectors, self regulating. So the carbon rods the electricity would arc between, and the intense light would be produced, and also intense heat. There's carbon arc welding and carbon arc torches and stuff to melt, to weld metal and cut metal and stuff like that. Uh, this is a self regulating arc lamp, so you can have very long carbon rods that like regulate as they come together as they get burned up with the electricity. And electricity, it does require a lot of electricity. Those Leyden jars were direct current capacitors, high voltage, 20 to 60,000 volts, from what I remember somewhere here. Could be charged up to 20 to 60,000 volts. Brush electric lamps. Wow, this is an interesting setup. Let's see, 1881 this is from. And then we have this is Xeon short arc lamp, 15 kilowatts. These are metal electrodes, so extremely bright. I don't know what brightness was in lumens. Okay, mercury arc and krypton. So all these exotic gases are obviously much more difficult to work with. I mean, the higher technological requirements, engineering requirements, than something like 2 sticks of what is compressed carbon? Is it like just charcoal that we can compress, and then electricity run across them, either AC or DC. They had both configurations. Let's see. Is this a movie projector? No. What was this? And you can see the arc electricity and then the burning carbon. Okay, well, that's another repeat. Alrighty. In my search, I did find like another old document. I keep finding these, but it just talks about some of the other tech here and uh, the gas filled tungsten lamp, quartz, mercury, nickel, tungsten. The sun and the carbon arc. So they're looking at the wavelengths of the light, and this one is interesting because it relates to this ultraviolet or light therapy that they were doing in the early 20s. This is like from 1929 or the. I'll provide a link to this one. I mean, it's not a big deal, but they were looking at like ultraviolet like therapy for which we know now too much ultraviolet, right, from the sun, you're going to get skin cancer supposedly. So but they were looking at therapy, and it'll tie back to electricity because back in the 1800s they were doing electrotherapy, like Kellogg's breakfast cereal, that guy. I'll talk about that more later, but it's interesting because they do all kinds of analysis on the spectrum, the light spectrum coming out. And they also allude to the changes that occurred, like here 1920, the composition of high intensity carbon arcs is no longer the same as what was used years ago. Probably because they went through the supply that they found and then created more that was like junk. And they're looking also at which one produces more ultraviolet, and they have like exotic stuff here on cobalt, nickel, aluminum arcs to get extreme ultraviolet, which is kind of interesting. I think they were thinking the higher ultraviolet, the higher energy, the better for you. You're gonna get like charged up or something, energized. Okay, that's all for that one. Let's look at some of the other tech that went away related to this. We had these Klieg lights. So in German, Krieg is war. And then, so I didn't look up the etymology of Klieg yet, but Klieg light. And it was used in filmmaking because, in Fresnel lenses, because the light coming off was equivalent to like daylight. They could film like daylight scenes at night or switch between. So it was very popular in the early days of filmmaking. And they had something called Klieg eye because you would get an inflammation of the eye from all the ultraviolet coming off, or not, it's not crazy amount, but it's so much, so bright, the lumens. And so the and how many hours they're running these lights that you're looking into. And I guess when you're doing like on a stage, the light's coming right at you. So they would get this Klieg eye, which is like a red, it looks like pink eye. Yeah, it doesn't look like they're smoked one or something. That looks like pink eye or something. But it's not. But it is an inflammation, conjunctivitis. And same, we had this snow blindness. So same idea with the ultraviolet. But the snow goggles are kind of interesting. Okay. And then let's see what else we got. Okay, now going on from that, we have this super intense light, and then it ties back to the heliostats as lighting up the interiors. And I think a lot of these had other purposes related to the airships, but talk about that of course later. But the specs of this, listen to this. This was from General Electric. Supposedly built these for coming up to, and then they were used during World War II, military grade searchlights. So 1 inch carbon arc, no light bulb. We can create how many just sticks of carbon in bins for lighting. The power was 78 volts, 150 amps. The candle power was 800 million. Now I think that's with the dish, which was a parabolic brass rhodium coated mirror. So, and it had a beam length of 5.6 miles. Effective beam visibility 28 to 35 miles. This was the generator, 15 kilowatts. Mm-hmm. Just unbelievable, right? So I think I have these are some photos of carbon arc searchlights. We also had carbon arc street lamps. So same thing, like you don't need, you just need the electricity, and theoretically it doesn't have to be wired because um, you have these DC light and jar capacitors available. So it would be kind of ad hoc as needed because this whole idea about running your factory 24/7 lighting is all put on us. So these carbon arc lamps, very old. You can get the idea on the searchlights. I wanted to see some. I know I had some images. This was on top of. This was one of the world's largest searchlights. Also carbon arc. So when it burned, it had 90,000 to 100,000 candles. Is that the same as lumens? And then when you had the lens, it magnified it to 375 million lumens, I believe. They say candle power. Unbelievable. And then I think there's a lot of the might be the idea that um, when you think of these searchlights, like in World War II, and there, I know there's stuff from I think Nazi Germany with their or Hitler's like big parades and stuff. They did. They had But what was interesting here was they had the searchlight, but then they also had a sound locator. So the anti-aircraft, for you to find the aircraft, you actually use these giant. This was actually not like it's not amplified, electrically amplified. This is all analog tech. Look at this thing. Can I look at that? So it's a giant ear, not a megaphone, but sound listening device, and you're like listening in, like, oh, I hear a plane or I hear something, right? And you can target in on it, I guess, that way. That's pretty interesting. No sight, you don't need like visibility, right? You could hear them through clouds and stuff theoretically. I don't know what the range was. Just really cool. um okay, and then they went to the radar locators. Get the idea on some of that. But also, so the idea with the heliostats, right? Like we have these large searchlights and all these different carbon arc lights, and all of this stuff was around in the 1800s. The carbon arc lamp, even Tesla was involved. Okay, and tons of patents were created in the 1800s tied to this stuff. All these different designs of beautiful lamps. The color spectrum from them was really appealing, or was decent, you know. And you could have compositions probably, and then also coatings on the glass or simple things that probably reduce the UV. And this was one. This was just look at this. Oh, this was just one of the old styles. But I think this one was also self feeding of the carbon tubes. See, I think this image. Oh, there we go. This is a picture from the Lord of the Ring, one of the Lord of the Rings shows. But the idea here is like you have what they show is like, oh, we're going to take just one mirror and then redirect the sunlight and beam it into our minds, right? And so this heliostat idea is so powerful. Like, of course, you would use this all day, every day, because even on a cloudy day, you can just theoretically magnify the light more and bring in more, and then have a single large strong beam of light come in. And then if you need lighting at night, or let's say you need to amend it, it is super cloudy, you can kick off your carbon arc searchlight and point it into the same relay system to transmit light throughout your complex, your infrastructure. Because we also have this concept that I haven't seen many people talk about, like with the beam splitting technology. So they talk about like, oh, in ancient times, the pyramids, these ancient um, underground structures, how did they light it? I mean, oh, I mean, they're showing it right here in this dumb show with like you just can shine sunlight down there, and then with the beam splitting, like here they show it's a little complicated, but in this, like, you can see like the beam coming in and then scattering out. So if you had say it only refracted 10% out and then 90% continued on past your split, right? You would just have it would be so simple to light up all kinds of stuff, because your beam doesn't have to be like some giant spotlight. You can have these small coherent powerful beams, not lasers, but up to that, level of intensity and energy, and then they could be scattered through. Just works so well. It'd be so cool. And this is different beam splitting with all kinds of stuff that can be done, refracting. This one splitting it into, oh, diffractive. They had these and then also with the uh with light, I talked about this before with there's we have optical communications, right? And we had this photo phone from Alexander Graham Bell that was patented in the so Alexander Graham Bell he patented this photo phone, which was just supposedly to transmit voice over light beams. Okay, so you can see like even here this looks like a dialer from old time phones like rotary phones, but these were actually, I believe, the pencil beams, or I'm not sure where the pencil beams were. This is speaker or receiver. So just like I mean, this is 1880 and they're sending audio voice, encoding it, transmitting it over light beams, decoding it, and you're hearing the voice real time. Okay. This where did this go? No, we have to have everything wired, right? Plugged because it's anyway. And think about with reflectors, right? Like this we the whatever say we had a assembly of 8 beams or however it was being transmitted and it wasn't like a huge like spotlight size of light. you could you could reflect this all over the place. Like, oh yeah, let's not talk about Edison, how he got rid of the carbon arc light. So we had Edison's big invention was the light bulb, obviously the incandescent light bulb. He also invented the phonograph, right? These guys are listening to I'm not sure what they're listening to something here. They find it quite funny. Oh, he also had these pyromagnets. I talked about that. I'll talk about that more. But this from Cassier's magazine, I'll provide a link again. But this one article again, the language on these things. This was from 1893 Engineering, and they have several articles in this big magazine. It's over like 500 pages, just on Edison. And this one, the eighth paper, so on his inventions. But this one begins just weird. It's all kinds of reference to Greek mythology. And then most potent and terrible of all was the tidal wave of the 19th century, surcharged with human thought and energy and enfranchised from the spell of superstitious veneration. One by one, the deified forces of nature were dragged from their cloudy thrones and forced to resign their scepters into mortal hands. Yeah, so just the writing. Let's see, we got this is talking about a carbon arc, voltaic arc, battery of 2,000 cells. Those are probably the Leyden jars. They illuminated a massive place in Paris with these lights, arc lights, the Jab- Jablokov candles, and then in Edison. So we have this this light source already, but no, 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 no. Think about it. Like, how do we get? We need more light. How do we re? Are we self-sustaining in our light sources? And with this, with the incandescent bulb, no, because I mean, right? Like manufacturing that compared to just having some compressed carbon and electricity available. It doesn't have to be like, uh, uh, doesn't have to be AC. It doesn't have to be coming from a generator. Anyway, then he in his experimentation, right, like with the different filaments in the incandescent bulb and gases or all this stuff that he was supposedly such a genius experimenting with, right? Let's see. Yeah, yeah. He's hunting for fiber. The explorer's assistance. What? He's an island boy, jungle boy. Where's he at here? It's not Edison. It's his assistants. Huh? Boy, that sounds familiar. Going to those poor places for looking for fiber. Yeah, he's like trying to carbonize or do all kinds of process or tricks or this or what techniques to different threads and filaments of metals and anyway, so then he gets the idea that we need to have fiber to use it as part of the filament stuff. And so You need to go to his buddies need to go to the Amazon for the fiber. I'll show you more about that. But went down a tangent there. But let's just talk about uh, these candles, these carbon arc. So this was two cylindrical, just compressed carbon pencils side by side. They had some plaster Paris, then the alternating arc, and massive light and heat for other things. Let's see, where did I highlight? They have all these photos of it, and then they talk about, okay, here we go. A closer examination of the great naturalist's description convinced him that in vegetable fibers alone could be found the ideal material of which he had been so long in search of, the prima materia, and a band of zealous and experienced agents was soon engaged in the work of investigation. And so, yeah, his McGowan agents and stuff, let me go back to the first one. Here's the first one. They're going to somewhere in the Amazon, the Napo River area. And yeah, they're documenting their journey. They're meeting all the natives. Here's a native boy, I guess, climbing, searching for fiber. He's hunting for Palm Tree Avenue in the forest. Yeah, they're somewhere in the Amazon. Here's a patriarch of the forest. And we got, this one. Anxious to be photographed. They don't really they look anxious. They look anxious. This one looks sad, like. And let's see. Then we got a micro photograph of bamboo section. So he's got micro photograph. Okay, so let me just read this one. It was only by the exercise of his national gift of gab that McGowan finally allayed their fears, the natives, and succeeded in inducing them to proceed. The society of these gentlemen was attended by some inconvenience, for although harmless in other respects, they were inveterate thieves, and a strict watch had to be maintained day and night upon the jewelry and other valuables deposited at the bottom of the boat, because the natives would steal them. One Indian native alone furnished an exception to the predatory instincts of his mate, and was retained throughout McGowan's journey to guard his interests. He was his guard, sure. Oh yeah, and then they're trying to get these Indians to go up to some place in the river. The Indians were hunted up, and by dint of bribes and other substantial stimulants, were imbued with sufficient courage to undertake the exploration of new sections of the Napo River. They wanted to get the F away from these weirdos. These people are like, yeah, these guys. Well, I don't know what was going on. This one is a little disturbing to me, with a group of native children, and none of them look very happy at all. Like at all. Just weird, man. Not good. I mean, with everything coming out with the Epstein boys, now we got. I mean, same thing. Nothing new under the sun. We got the Edison and his excited agents or experienced agents that were sent out to hunt for fiber. Like, oh, Mr. Edison, the big old technological. Oh, so technological, he's got to go down here for what? Just starts to make more and more sense. So let's see what else I got in here. Okay, on the lighting. So we had the photo phone. Oh, this carbon arc. This was just a paper on some of the attributes and history, but I mean the same story here. However, such illumination, the carbon arc light, had the same fundamental problems of our lamps. That is the need of a source of power and a network for its distribution. False. That's false, because you had the DC, you had all the DC stuff. We had the lime or calcium light. I'll talk about that next. It's the Limelights. Yeah, so simple. And then this magnesium light, I didn't find too much. I was kind of looking at that one. I think they were just burning, like they were burning carbon. They were burning magnesium rods or something. And maybe that produced You probably want the UV if you're doing like etchings on metal plates and stuff like that, as far as I know. So, but maybe not. I mean, these lights were so intense that was it needed? Maybe. Okay, yeah, that's enough of Edison. Reading that stuff, it's like pretty interesting. Um, just all the language and everything, like how they, the verbosity of how they write. Got a helicopter, lo-fi. And it's kind of hazy. They've been chemtrailing all day. So on the Limelights, this is such a cool thing. This was so we have the simple sustainable carbon arc. When you're like, well, you got to get the electricity going, yeah, and that goes back to the steam engines. And I'll talk about that more. But the this Limelight's just so simple. This is a this device is the same device used for like the old atomic hydrogen welding that I guess today I think it falls under TIG welding. I don't know. I'm not a welder. But this device where they have the hydrogen and oxygen gas pipes, and then the hydrogen oxygen flame is super hot, and then all you have there, that's calcium oxide. That's after the limestone is cooked. It turns into calcium oxide and then starts to glow super bright. So, where do we get the hydrogen and oxygen? Water. Where do we get calcium oxide? Limestone. Boy, that sounds pretty sustainable to me. And these, just so simple. These lights, these lights were used in stage lighting, like in theaters. There was orpheum theaters and all kinds of other stuff. I mean, then they took it over for the filmmaking. The Film Actors Guild did, and so here, this is like this must be a prop, but that would be like like a cylindrical piece of limestone, or I don't know how once it's cooked to the calcium oxide, I don't know how long that would last. Like, would it just eventually start to disintegrate or powder? I don't know, lose its integrity. I don't know, or would it just last forever and as long as you didn't like disturb it? And so they use these in the theaters, and then they had whatever lens to magnify, and then you had spotlights, or you were spotlighting, or it was going through some film or projector later on. So it's just great technology. And I'll talk about this more because it goes right into I mean, the oxygen and hydrogen gases are so much that can be done with them. Hydrogen, maybe I'll talk about that next because it's just so amazing. This is just one of the YouTube of one of the lights, and less electricity going through I mean, the less bright the arc was, the less the carbon would burn and stuff, right? Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm glad to have that up. Check that out. More than half a million of these street lamps, these carbon arc street lamps, were in service during the first decade of the 20th century. So 1910, 1900, 1910. Where did they all come from? They were all left over from the last reset, and then they had to get rid of them. 500,000. That was just like how many got destroyed and stuff. They were all over the place. And it makes so much sense because you don't need a huge infrastructure. Because you have these Leyden jars. And anyway, okay, so yeah, that's it for today. Um, I'll talk more about the limelights next time with the oxyhydrogen, and then we have oxyhydrogen or atomic welding that they got rid of. They had devices back in like the 40s that it took a lot of electricity, but they split water and generated hydrogen gas and oxygen gas, and then you use that in the welding. You needed tungsten rods. So I guess in this the limelight you don't. Uh, you just need to heat up. You just need to cook that piece of limestone. But yeah, the heliostat tech is still the way to go. And with lighting, there was so much out there with like the rhodium coated mirror and all these different treatments. It's quite what we've lost. It's just unbelievable. And the mining. When I first saw this on whatever Lord of the Rings show, I was just like, you got to be kidding me. Just all in plain sight. And I don't have it up, but the idea too, I think much of what we have, what has been described to us, given to us as technology is like, or the the progression or the understanding of things is like almost like a cargo cult that's happened, it seems like, because it goes back to schooling, because like the idea that, oh, like the thing with Thomas Edison, like, oh, how I, obviously I'm American, and he's, there's so much growing up that was drilled in about Thomas Edison, and oh, such an amazing inventor and all this, all freaking hogwash. They were the cleanup crew trying to find and hide and get patent lockup and start moving off of sustainable technologies into things that could be controlled. You need, all the infrastructure, all the garbage we have today. Anyway, go on forever. All right, that's all for now. Till next time.